What kind of woman stands in the snow when she has already been turned away once in her life, and chooses not to beg the second time? In the early winter of 1887, just days before Christmas pressed its cold breath against the Wyoming territory, a stagecoach creaked to a halt at the edge of an isolated ranch, its wheels half buried in snow, its horses steaming and restless. The land around the coal ranch was silent in a way that felt intentional, as if the plains themselves had decided to keep their distance. Wind cut low across the ground, carrying fine needles of ice that found every weakness in cloth and skin. When the coach door opened, Clara Bennett stepped down slowly, as though she were measuring the ground before trusting it with her weight. She was thin, her coat worn shiny at the elbows, her boots cracked and softened by too many miles. Everything about her suggested distance, long roads, closed doors, and the quiet endurance of someone who had learned not to expect warmth where it had not been promised. She stood there alone for a moment after the coach pulled away, watching it disappear into the pale horizon. No one waved, no one followed. The sound of the wheels faded, leaving only wind and the low creak of the ranch fence. Clara tightened her scarf, lifted her small bag, and walked toward the house. Each step felt deliberate, not hesitant. She had come too far for hesitation. The house was solid, practical, built by hands that understood storms. Smoke rose faintly from the chimney. Light flickered behind one window. Clara knocked once, then waited. When the door opened, the man who stood there did not look surprised to see her, but neither did he look pleased. Ethan Cole was broad-shouldered, his face lined in ways that came from work rather than age, his eyes sharp and tired at the same time. He took her in quickly, not rudely, but thoroughly, as if assessing a problem rather than greeting a person. "You're at the wrong place," he said before she could speak. Clara did not flinch. She had expected that sentence, or one like it. She reached into her bag and drew out a folded letter, the paper creased and soft from handling. She held it out without a word. Ethan hesitated, then took it, glancing at the seal, at the handwriting. He read it in silence while the wind pushed against Clara's back, cold creeping up through her boots. When he finished, his jaw tightened. "I never ordered a wife," he said. "This is a mistake." "I was told otherwise," Clara replied, her voice calm, neither challenging nor pleading. "Your sister-in-law wrote, after your wife passed." Something passed across his face at that, fast, controlled, but sharp. He folded the letter once, then again, and handed it back. "She shouldn't have done that." Clara nodded. That was all. No argument followed, no protest. The quiet between them stretched, filled only by the sound of wind and the faint crackle of fire inside the house. Ethan waited, perhaps expecting tears, or anger, or desperation. None came. Clara stood there, hands numb, posture straight, eyes steady. She looked like someone prepared to hear no, because she had heard it before. "I'll leave in the morning," she said finally. "I won't trouble you longer than that." Ethan looked past her, at the empty land, at the sky already darkening. The temperature was dropping fast. He knew what a night like this could do. After a moment, he stepped aside, not enough to invite her in, but enough to make space. "There's a shed out back," he said. "You can stay there, just for the night." It was not kindness offered freely, but it was not cruelty either. It was the narrow strip of ground between them. Clara accepted it the way she accepted everything else, without comment. She followed his directions, carrying her bag across the yard to the small structure behind the house. It smelled of wood and dust and cold iron. She set her things down and waited. Later, when darkness had fully settled, Ethan left food, water, and a thick blanket outside the door. He did not knock. He did not speak. When Clara opened the door and saw the items, she brought them inside quietly, as though afraid gratitude might break something fragile. Inside the house, 2 children watched from the top of the stairs. Sam, old enough to understand silence, and Rose, young enough to believe it meant something hopeful. "Do you think she's a gift?" Rose whispered. Sam did not answer. Below them, Ethan sat by the fire, staring into the embers, replaying words he had not meant to hear spoken again. Wife. Stay. Morning. That night, the wind howled harder. Snow pressed against the shed walls. Clara lay wrapped in the blanket, staring at the ceiling, listening to the ranch breathe around her. She did not cry. She did not pray. She simply waited for morning, for whatever came next, carrying the familiar weight of being unwanted, and the quieter strength of knowing she could survive it. Dawn came pale and cold. Clara rose before the house stirred, folding the blanket neatly, gathering her things. She stepped outside just as Ethan emerged from the barn. He stopped when he saw her heading toward the road. "You can't walk out in this," he said. She met his gaze. "I won't stay where I'm not wanted." The words were not sharp. They were factual. Ethan stood there, breath visible, caught between what he owed and what he feared. After a long moment, he spoke again. "You can stay," he said. "Not as my wife, just not alone." Clara considered him, the house, the land. "I'll work," she said, "for my keep." It was the first thing that truly unsettled him. He nodded once. The line between them remained, but it had shifted, just slightly, under the weight of choice. Staying did not change Clara Bennett's position in the house. It only made it visible. She slept in the shed for several more nights, rising before dawn, careful not to disturb the main house, careful not to take up space that had not been offered. The cold lingered there longer than it did inside, clinging to the walls and floor. But Clara did not complain. She washed at the pump until her fingers burned, warmed her hands over a small tin stove, and waited for instruction that never quite came. Ethan Cole did not tell her what to do. He simply allowed her to remain, and that permission came with an unspoken expectation. She would not ask for more. So she worked where work was obvious. She swept. She carried wood. She noticed what had been neglected long enough that no one remembered when it began. When Sam came in one morning with a boot split along the seam, she took it, mended it by lamplight, and returned it without comment. When Rose sat quietly at the table, twisting straw between her fingers, Clara showed her how to shape it into a doll. She did not touch the girl's hair. She did not kiss her forehead. She waited. Ethan watched all of it without appearing to. He did not thank her. He did not stop her. He moved through the house with the same careful reserve he used everywhere else, as if any wrong step might wake something he had put to rest. Clara's presence unsettled him not because she demanded attention, but because she did not. She asked for nothing. That was harder to manage. The children noticed first. Sam noticed the way the house felt quieter without being empty, the way meals were warmer, the way Clara listened without interrupting. Rose noticed that Clara stayed when she cried, not touching, just humming softly, a sound so gentle, it seemed to belong to the walls themselves. To Rose, this felt like kindness. To Sam, it felt like something heavier, like relief he didn't know how to name. One afternoon, as snow fell steadily and the sky hung low, Maggie Holloway arrived with a basket of eggs and a jar of tea. She took in Clara at a glance, noting the set of her shoulders, the careful distance she kept from Ethan. "You walk like someone who's been left before," Maggie said, not unkindly. Clara met her eyes and nodded. There was no shame in it. Maggie smiled then, slow and knowing. That kind learns how to stand. Later, as the fire crackled and the children listened, Maggie spoke of winters that taught more than survival. Clara listened too, hands folded, learning the shape of this household not through words, but through what remained unsaid. Ethan said little. He watched Maggie leave, watched Clara close the door gently behind her, and felt the strange sensation of a place shifting without moving. That night, Rose woke screaming. Ethan froze in the doorway, helpless in the face of grief he could not reach. Clara came quietly, sat beside the bed, and hummed. No promises, no explanations. Just sound, steady and low, until Rose's breathing slowed. Sam stood in the hall listening, his small hands clenched. In the morning, he left a note for Clara on the table. 3 words, written carefully. "Stay with us." Ethan read it later. He said nothing, but something inside him cracked, just enough to let air in. Days passed. Clara remained careful. She did not read the letters she found while stacking firewood, only placed them back where they belonged. She left Ethan a note instead. Even strong walls crack from the inside. He found it that evening and sat with it long after the children slept. The accident came without warning. Ice. A wrong step. Pain sharp and sudden. Clara moved before thought, binding his leg with her scarf, dragging him inch by inch through the snow. Maggie came. The children helped. That night, Ethan woke to firelight and Clara's steady presence. He saw her then, not as a burden, not as a guest, but as someone who had chosen to act. After Christmas, the letter arrived. Denver, warmth, work, a future that belonged only to her. Ethan did not ask her to stay. Sam gave her a pen. Rose gave her a drawing. My family. Clara read the letter twice. Then she folded it carefully and set it aside. In early January, Ethan showed her the room. A bed, a stove, a key. Not a promise, a choice. She took it. Grief does not announce itself when it returns. It waits until the house feels full enough to notice what is missing. Ethan Cole had learned to live with absence the way other men learn to live with weather. Mary had been gone for 3 winters, yet her presence remained fixed in the small, ordinary places. An empty hook by the door where her shawl once hung. A chipped cup no one else chose. A drawer that stayed closed because opening it meant remembering how it felt to be known. He had sealed those things away not with anger, but with discipline. He worked harder. He spoke less. He told himself that survival was proof enough of strength. Clara's quiet arrival unsettled that order. Not because she resembled Mary. She did not. But because she moved through the house without fear of what lingered. She did not avoid the spaces that carried memory. She did not fill them either. She simply existed alongside them, as if grief were not something to be conquered, but something that could be lived with. The children were the first to reflect that shift back at him. Sam had always been observant, careful in the way boys become when they learn too early that adults break. He watched Ethan closely, measuring tone and silence, and now he watched Clara too. He saw how she listened when he spoke, how she never corrected him unless asked, how she treated his thoughts as if they mattered. Rose, younger and unguarded, followed Clara like a shadow, drawn to the steadiness of her presence. When she laughed, it was soft at first, surprised by itself, like a sound the house had forgotten how to hold. Ethan noticed the changes in small ways. Meals lingered longer. The fire was tended without being fussed over. The children slept more soundly. None of it felt forced. That, more than anything, made him uneasy. He had spent years controlling pain by limiting attachment. Clara did the opposite without ever naming it. One afternoon, while hauling firewood, Clara discovered the box. It was tucked beneath the lower shelf, half hidden by dust and shadow. She recognized it immediately, not because she had been looking for it, but because some things announced their importance quietly. Inside were letters, tied with a ribbon gone thin from time. Mary's handwriting filled the pages, looping and familiar. Clara closed the box without reading. She did not need to know the words to understand their weight. That evening she left Ethan a note on the kitchen table. Even strong walls crack from the inside. He found it after the children were asleep. He read it once, then again, irritation flaring briefly before something deeper settled in. He retrieved the box from where Clara had left it untouched and carried it to the chair by the fire. The letters were dated across years, ordinary days, hard days, hopeful ones. Mary had written of loneliness, of fear, of loving him even when he was silent. Ethan read until the fire burned low, until his chest tightened in ways he could no longer ignore. Clara did not ask him about it. The next morning she worked as usual. That restraint mattered. It allowed him to sit with the ache without turning it into a performance or a confession. Trust, he realized, did not require explanation. It required space. The accident came days later, sudden and unforgiving. Ice gave way beneath his boot while clearing the trough. Pain flashed white and immediate. The cold pressed in fast. Ethan remembered thinking, with strange clarity, that this was how men disappeared, quietly, without witnesses. Then Clara was there. Her scarf became a bandage. Her voice became direction. She dragged him, inch by inch, back toward the house, refusing panic, refusing to stop. Maggie arrived not long after, drawn by instinct and weather. Sam and Rose followed instructions with shaking hands. The house filled with urgency and heat and movement. When Ethan woke that night, pain dull but present, he saw Clara by the fire, her posture steady, exhaustion held in check. In that moment, something shifted irrevocably. He did not feel saved. He felt seen. Recovery was slow. The children hovered. Clara took charge without claiming authority, coordinating meals, tending wounds, ensuring routines held. Ethan watched her navigate the household not as a replacement, not as a caretaker demanding gratitude, but as someone who understood responsibility without ownership. It frightened him how much he relied on it. When the supply wagon arrived after Christmas, it brought letters and news from the wider world. Clara's envelope bore a Denver seal. A job, warmth, independence. A life that required no permission. Ethan read her face as she held it, saw the careful consideration there. He said nothing. The children spoke instead. Sam with his pen, Rose with her drawing. My family. That night, Ethan lay awake, listening to the house settle. He realized then that grief had not left him when Mary died. It had merely been waiting for someone brave enough not to fear it. Clara had not asked him to let go. She had simply stood close enough for him to feel again. Trust had formed without promises. Pain had surfaced without accusation. And in the quiet, unspoken space between them, something long closed had begun to open. The night did not announce itself as a turning point. It arrived the way winter always did, quietly, without ceremony, carrying consequences that could not be undone. The wind came first, rising from the west, flattening the land beneath it. Snow followed, heavy and wet, then sharp and driving, erasing edges, swallowing sound. By the time darkness settled over the coal ranch, the world had narrowed to firelight and breath, to the creak of wood under strain. Ethan lay on the narrow bed in the front room, leg bound, pain pulsing dully beneath layers of cloth. He was awake, though his eyes were closed, listening to the house adjust itself around his injury. He had been strong his entire life. Strength to him had always meant endurance without assistance, the ability to carry weight alone. Lying there, dependent on others for movement, warmth, and time, felt like a violation of something essential. What unsettled him more was not the helplessness, but the calm with which Clara moved through it. She did not hover. She did not soften her voice or apologize for taking charge. She checked the fire, measured water, counted hours. When Maggie spoke, Clara listened. When the children watched, she gave them tasks, small and manageable, anchoring them in usefulness rather than fear. It was leadership without command, authority without insistence. Ethan recognized it instinctively, even as it challenged everything he believed about power. Pain sharpened memory. As the night deepened, he drifted in and out of sleep, seeing flashes of other winters. Mary's hands red from cold, her quiet insistence that he come inside, her patience when he shut down rather than speak. He woke once to find Clara sitting nearby, mending something by lamplight, her movement steady despite exhaustion. For a moment, disorientation washed over him. Then clarity followed, stark and unavoidable. She had chosen to be here. No one had demanded it. No one had promised her anything in return. Outside, the storm intensified. Snow piled against the walls, sealing the house in. Survival became immediate and practical. Clara rationed wood, managed meals, adjusted schedules. Maggie stayed until morning, then left reluctantly, promising to return as soon as the weather allowed. The children slept in shifts, comforted by routine. Ethan watched all of it, silent, absorbing the reality of a household functioning not because he commanded it, but because Clara understood it. In the early hours, fever took him. The room blurred. Pain returned sharp and insistent. Clara noticed immediately. She cooled his skin, spoke softly but firmly, grounding him when his thoughts scattered. He reached for her once, not consciously, fingers catching fabric. She did not pull away. She steadied him, anchored him, then returned to her work as if nothing extraordinary had occurred. That restraint broke something open in him. By morning the storm had passed, leaving the land transformed, white, immense, unforgiving. The danger had receded, but its mark remained. Ethan woke to sunlight filtering weakly through the window and realized, with sudden certainty, that the night had taken something from him and given something back in its place. He was no longer simply enduring. He was being carried. Clara did not speak of what she had done. She did not frame it as sacrifice or loyalty. When Ethan thanked her, haltingly, she acknowledged it with a nod, nothing more. "You would have done the same," she said. He knew that was not entirely true. He might have tried, but trying was different from acting without hesitation. The power dynamic between them had shifted, not in dominance, but in understanding. She was not a guest. She was not a burden. She was essential. As days passed and his strength returned slowly, Ethan found himself watching her differently, not with guarded suspicion, but with attention. He noticed the way she anticipated needs before they were spoken, the way she left space where space was required. He noticed how the children gravitated toward her not out of desperation, but trust. That trust, he realized, was earned daily, through consistency rather than grand gestures. One afternoon, as Clara stepped outside to shake out a blanket, Ethan saw her pause at the edge of the yard, looking out across the land. There was no longing in her posture, no visible conflict, only consideration. He understood then that belonging was not something claimed, it was something allowed. When the supply wagon finally arrived, bringing letters, news, and Clara's offer from Denver, the timing felt cruelly precise. Ethan read her face again, saw the calculation there, the weighing of futures. He did not interrupt it. He did not argue. He offered her what he had always withheld from others, freedom without consequence. That night the house was quiet. The children slept. Clara sat at the table, the letter folded beside her. Ethan joined her, careful of his leg, and for a long time neither spoke. The fire crackled softly. Outside, the land rested, indifferent to human decisions. "Whatever you choose," he said finally, "it won't be wrong." Clara looked at him, really looked, and something in her expression softened. The night had changed them both. Survival had given way to something steadier, deeper. Belonging, she understood, did not mean staying because you had nowhere else to go. It meant staying because you were seen. The choice remained, but the meaning of it had shifted. Freedom did not arrive like a temptation. It arrived folded neatly in an envelope, written in careful ink, offering warmth, steady wages, a room with a door that locked, and a life that asked no permission from anyone. Denver was not a dream. It was practical. Clara Bennett understood that kind of promise. She had built her life on practicality, on choosing the option that allowed her to stand on her own feet. For several nights after the letter arrived, she held it without opening it again, not out of fear, but because she already knew what it contained and what it did not. Ethan Cole did not ask her what she would do. He did not watch her too closely. That restraint, more than any plea, weighed on her. He moved carefully now, healing slowly, refusing to let injury become excuse. He returned to work with quiet determination, adapting rather than forcing his body back into old rhythms. Clara noticed. She noticed everything, but she did not interpret it as obligation. She had learned long ago the danger of confusing gratitude with belonging. The children waited without knowing they were waiting. Sam said nothing, but his eyes followed her more closely than before. Rose asked small questions that circled the truth without landing on it. How far is Denver? Do they have snow there? Would you come back? Clara answered honestly. She did not promise what she could not guarantee. That honesty, too, was a kind of care. One morning, after a night of windless cold, Ethan asked her to follow him. He moved slowly, favoring his leg, but his posture was steady. He led her down the hall to a door that had remained closed since before she arrived. He unlocked it and stepped aside. Inside was a small room, plainly furnished. A bed, a table, shelves waiting to be filled, a stove already cleaned and prepared. On the wall, pinned carefully, was Rose's drawing. On the table lay a small iron key. "This is yours," Ethan said, "if you want it." He did not frame it as an offer of marriage. He did not attach expectation. "You don't owe anything," he added. "You can leave whenever you choose. The road will stay open." Clara took in the room slowly. It was not grand. It was not romantic, but it was intentional. The space had been made for her, not as a role to fill, but as a person who might stay. The key was not a claim. It was acknowledgement. She understood then that this was the truest choice she had ever been given. Denver promised independence. This place offered something different: presence without possession, commitment without captivity. She did not answer immediately. She carried the key with her through the day, its weight unfamiliar but steady. The decision came quietly, not with certainty, but with clarity. That evening, as the sun dipped low and the mountains caught the last light, Clara spoke. "I've had places to go," she said, "but I've never had a reason to stay. Until now." Ethan nodded. He did not reach for her. He did not speak vows. He simply accepted the truth of what she had said. The days that followed unfolded without spectacle. The letter to Denver was answered politely, declined without regret. Life at the ranch continued, altered not by declaration, but by alignment. Clara moved into the room. The children treated it as a fact, not a question. Sam brought her a book. Rose placed her dolls on the shelf. Ethan respected the boundary of the closed door as carefully as he respected the open ones. When they spoke of a union, it was not framed as rescue or redemption. Maggie officiated because she understood the shape of unconventional promises. There was no dress bought for the occasion, only a simple one Clara made herself, practical and clean. Ethan wore his best shirt, pressed but familiar. The ceremony took place inside, near the fire, where warmth was reliable and witnesses were few. "I won't ask you to belong to me," Ethan said, his voice steady. "Only to walk beside me." Clara met his eyes. "I already am." Sam stepped forward with the ring he had carved from wood and bone, placing it in his father's hand. Ethan tied it gently around Clara's wrist, the gesture unpolished but sincere. No one spoke of forever. They spoke of now. That was enough. The winter eased, not quickly, but surely. Snow melted in patches. The land breathed again. One evening, the family sat wrapped in blankets on the porch, the children heavy with sleep. Clara leaned against Ethan's shoulder, feeling the weight of what had been and what was no longer necessary to fear. "This is home," she said, not as a question. Ethan did not correct her. He did not define it further. "Home," he repeated. The world had not changed. Loss still existed. The road still stretched outward, open and unforgiving. But here, in this place chosen freely, no one was left standing at the door. Some stories end with triumph, others end with escape. This one ends with a quieter truth. Clara did not stay because she was afraid to leave. She stayed because she was finally free enough to choose. Ethan did not open his life because he was healed, but because he was willing to heal in the presence of another. The children did not gain a replacement, but a constant. And the house, long shaped by absence, learned how to hold sound again without breaking. Nothing about this union followed rules written by others. There were no grand vows, no claims of ownership, no promises made under pressure. What bound them was something far sturdier: respect that did not demand proof, trust that did not require explanation, and love that did not need to be loud to be certain. In the end, home was not the ranch, or the room, or even the people themselves. It was the shared decision to remain, to stay when leaving was possible, to sit in the quiet without fear, to let the past exist without allowing it to rule. The wind still moves across the Wyoming plains. Winters still come hard and long. But in that house, on that land, no one waits alone in the cold anymore. End of article. Good night.